The town sat under a wide sky where dust moved slowly, with the wind wooden buildings lined the main road, and each one held stories from long ago. People lived simple lives, waking early, working hard, and resting. When the sun went down, many believed. The wild days were gone, and danger no longer walked the streets, but the land remembered everything, and sometimes the past. Returned quietly, man lived near the edge of town in a small house built with his own hands. He rose before sunrise and stepped outside to feel the cool air. He cared for animals, fixed fences, and helped neighbors when asked. He did not speak much and kept his eyes lowered. When passing others, people saw him as calm and steady. Someone who carried weight inside, but never showed. Children waved at him, and elders nodded with respect. Long ago he had traveled through rough places. He had seen hunger, fear, and hard choices. Those memories stayed with him like shadows that followed at a distance. He chose this town because it felt like a place where a man could start again. He wanted quiet days and honest work. He wanted to sleep without listening for danger. The town had a main street that stayed busy in the mornings. Wagons rolled by, boots hit the ground, and voices mixed. With the sound of animals, a small store sold tools and food, a place to eat, served warm meals to tired workers. Life followed a slow rhythm that most people trusted some. Evenings, the elders spoke about the old days. They talked about lawless riders and unfair deals. They talked about moments when good people stayed silent to survive. Younger folks listened with wide eyes but believed those stories belonged to another time. One morning, strangers arrived. They rode in with dust on their clothes and sharp looks in their eyes. They did not smile or greet anyone. They stopped in front of the store and watched the street like they were measuring something. People felt the change right away. Conversations became quiet, doors closed slower than usual. The air felt heavy. The man near the edge of town noticed the strangers too. He felt a tightness in his chest that he had not felt in years. He tried to ignore it. He told himself that travelers came and went all the time. Still, he stayed alert and listened more than he spoke. Over the next days, the strangers returned to the street again, and again they asked small questions. Where did people come from? Who owned the land? Who decided what was fair? Their voices were smooth, but their eyes were cold. The town answered carefully. The man continued his routine, but he felt watched at night. He sat outside and looked at the stars. He remembered promises he made to himself about staying out of trouble. He knew peace often came with a price, and sometimes that price was silence. Sai, young worker from the store, visited him one evening. The worker spoke softly about fear spreading through town. People were worried but did not want to say it out loud. The man listened without interruption. He nodded and offered water. They sat together as the sun fell. The worker asked if the man believed the town was safe. The man paused, chose his words carefully. He said safety was something people made together, not something given freely. The worker left feeling unsure, but thankful. The next morning, the street was crowded. More people than usual gathered. Some came to shop, others came to watch. All the strangers stood together near the center of the road. They spoke among themselves and laughed quietly. The sound did not feel friendly. The man arrived later, carrying supplies. He sensed eyes turning toward him. He did not look back. He moved with purpose, steady and calm. He placed his items down and greeted the shop owner with a simple note. A sudden argument broke out. Nearby voices rose, but stopped short of chaos. People froze and waited. No one wanted to be the first to move. The man stood still and listened. He understood the meaning behind the words even before others did. The moment passed without action, but the feeling stayed. People went home early that day. Doors locked sooner. Lights went out faster. The town felt smaller as night came. The man sat alone and thought about choices. He thought about how one moment could change many lives. He wondered if he could remain a quiet witness forever. He did not know the answer yet. In the distance, thunder rolled. Even though the sky was clear, it felt like a warning or a reminder. The land was still alive and watching, and something was moving toward a moment that no one could stop. As the night grew deeper, the man stood and looked toward the town. He took a long breath and prepared himself for whatever the next day might bring. He did not seek attention or conflict. He only wanted to do what felt right when the time came. The town slept unaware that a simple scene was forming, a scene that would soon be spoken about for years. A scene that would test fear, courage, and truth. This was only the beginning. Morning came slowly over the sky turned pale, and the air felt tight. People stepped outside with caution, as if something unseen waited for them. The usual sounds returned, but they felt weaker than before. The rhythm of life was still there, but it stumbled. The man woke early again. He felt restless, and his sleep had been light. He washed his face and stood still, listening. Nothing unusual reached his ears, yet his body felt alert. He knew this feeling from long ago. It was the feeling that came before change. As he walked toward the town, he noticed small signs. Windows closed. Faster voices stopped when he passed. People watched him, then looked away. He did not blame them. Fear made people quiet and careful. He understood that better than most. The strangers were already there, standing in the open, as if they owned the space. They spoke loudly now. Their words carried across the street, drawing attention. They spoke about land rules and control. They spoke like men who expected answers, not discussion. A group gathered nearby. Some listened, some pretended not to hear. The town leader stood uncertain, trying to keep calm. He spoke about peace and order. His voice shook, even though he tried to hide it. The man stayed at the edge of the crowd. He watched faces and hands. He remembered moments from his past where crowds turned dangerous. When fear grew too strong, he kept his breathing slow and steady. One stranger stepped forward and asked a question that cut deep. He asked who in town had strength to stand up when things went wrong. The silence that followed was heavy. No one answered. Eyes moved toward the ground. The man felt that tightness again. He knew the question was not simple. It was a challenge and a test. He looked around and saw worry. In familiar faces, he saw the cost of silence written clearly. Still, he did not speak. He waited. He believed moments should be chosen carefully. The wrong step could bring harm to many. The strangers laughed softly and turned away. They walked through the street, touching fences and walls like marks of claim. People moved aside and let them pass. Later that day, work felt harder than usual. The sun burned hotter and time moved slowly. The man helped repair a roof for an older neighbor. His hands worked while his mind stayed elsewhere. The neighbor spoke about leaving town for a while. The man listened and nodded. As evening approached, the sky darkened earlier than expected. Clouds gathered thick, and low wind moved through the street, carrying dust and tension. The man returned home but did not settle. He paced and thought. He remembered a promise he once made to himself: to never ignore a moment when someone needed help, to never turn away from truth, even when it scared him. That promise had cost him before, but it had also saved lives. Zaynok came at his door. It was the same young worker from before. The worker looked tired and afraid. He spoke about rumors spreading. He spoke about plans being made behind closed doors. The man invited him inside and listened quietly. The worker asked what should be done. The man answered slowly. He said the town needed to remember who they were and what they believed. He said fear grew when people stood alone. The worker left with uncertain hope. The man stood in the doorway long after he was gone. The wind carried distant voices from town. The night felt alive and restless. Later, the strangers returned again. This time they gathered people openly. They spoke of order and control. They spoke of protection at a price. Some nodded. Others looked away. The man stepped closer, not to speak, but to listen. He wanted to understand their intent fully. He felt eyes on him again. The strangers noticed his presence and smiled thin smiles. One of them addressed him directly, asking where he stood. The street went quiet. All movement stopped. The moment stretched long and heavy. The man took a breath. He did not answer yet. He looked at the people around him. He saw fear, hope, and expectation mixed together. He realized the choice before him was no longer just his own. Before he could speak, a shout broke the silence. A disagreement erupted nearby. It did not turn violent, but it shook the crowd. People backed away, and tension spiked. The strangers used the moment to leave, promising they would return soon. Their words echoed long after they were gone. Night fell fast. The town did not sleep well. Lamps stayed lit. Voices whispered behind walls. The man sat outside again, staring toward the dark road leading into town. He knew the calm days were ending. He knew a scene was forming piece by piece. He did not know exactly how it would unfold, but he felt its pull strong and clear. He stood and prepared himself, not with anger but with resolve. He understood that doing nothing was also a choice, and soon a choice would be demanded from everyone. The wind carried dust across the land like a warning. The town waited unknowingly at the edge of something unforgettable, and the man knew the next day would bring a moment that could no longer be avoided. Morning came with a heavy sky and a restless wind. The town seemed quieter than usual. People moved slowly, carrying the weight of yesterday in their steps. The man left his house early and walked toward the center of town. He felt the tension in the air and knew it would not be long before something happened. The strangers had returned already. They were standing near the main road, watching everything and everyone. Their presence made the town feel smaller. People whispered behind doors, but the sound never reached the streets. The man stayed at the edge of the crowd. He watched carefully, trying to read the intentions of the newcomers. He remembered the lessons from his past, that moments like this were never ordinary. They held truth. Behind every action and every word, a group of townspeople gathered together. They looked nervous and uncertain. Their eyes went back and forth between the strangers and the man. They wanted guidance, but did not know who could give it. The man knew the question would be asked eventually, and he would have to answer in a way that mattered. Suddenly, one of the strangers spoke loudly, demanding to know who in the town had authority, who could make decisions without fear, who would stand when danger came. The air grew thick with silence. As the crowd waited for an answer, the man took a deep breath and stepped forward slowly. His eyes moved across the faces of the townspeople. He saw hope hidden under fear. He saw people wishing for courage they did not yet believe they had. He spoke calmly and clearly about the importance of truth and standing for what is right. He did not raise his voice. He did not make threats. His words were steady and firm, and they carried across the street. They were simple words that reminded people of their strengths. Some townspeople looked relieved. Others felt afraid. They were not sure if he could protect them, or if speaking out would make things worse. The man understood that fear was natural. He had felt it himself in other times, in other places. The strangers listened silently. Then one of them laughed quietly and asked if he believed he could change what was coming if people listened to him. The man did not answer immediately. He knew the question was not about strength alone, but about understanding and timing. Meanwhile, the wind picked up, carrying dust and the sound of animals in the distance. The town felt small and fragile in the wide open land. Everything seemed to wait for the next movement. Man finally spoke again about the choices people had. He told them courage did not mean no fear. It meant acting even when fear was present. He reminded them that standing together was stronger than standing alone. A few of the townspeople nodded. Slowly, they felt a small spark of confidence, but still feared the unknown. The man noticed the change. He knew moments like this started quietly and grew slowly. One of the younger men stepped forward to ask if they would be safe if they followed him. The man shook his head gently. He said safety was not promised, but standing with truth would give them purpose and chance to survive what was coming. The strangers exchanged words among themselves. They walked slowly through the street, looking at the faces they had questioned. They seemed to measure strength and weakness with careful eyes. The man stayed calm and observed everything mattered. The way someone stood, the way they moved, the way they looked at each other. Each detail was part of a larger picture that would soon reveal itself later. The town leader came to speak privately with the man. He admitted he had been afraid to act. He admitted the strangers had made people uncertain about everything. He asked what should be done. The man suggested caution, but also preparation. He said the town must understand their own strength before reacting. By afternoon, the crowd grew curious as the strangers demonstrated more presence. They moved objects on the street. They spoke of ownership and control. Their words were heavy and deliberate, but no one could tell what was true and what was bluff. The man walked among the townspeople quietly, offering reassurance without raising alarm. He reminded them to keep calm and not make mistakes. From fear alone, he spoke with honesty and patience, letting them understand the value of careful observation. Evening fell, and the sky turned dark quickly. The wind carried whispers from houses and doors. The town felt alive with tension and uncertainty. The man returned home and stood outside, staring at the stars. He thought about the choices already made and the ones he would have to make soon. He remembered the moments in his life when he had to act, Even when unsure, he remembered losses and victories. That taught him patience and understanding. He knew the next day would demand action, and the right words at the right time. Night deepened, and the town held its breath. People locked doors and stayed close to loved ones. The man sat alone thinking about courage and fear and how both shaped decisions. He knew the strangers would return, and the scene would not remain simple. Prepared himself to guide the townspeople without forcing them. He prepared himself to stand with truth, even if others faltered. He understood that this moment could define many lives for years to come. The wind blew cold across the town, carrying dust and distant sounds. The man stood ready, knowing the morning would bring answers and the streets would no longer feel safe or simple. The Wild West scene was growing, and soon it would be unforgettable. Morning broke with a sky full of gray clouds. The town felt different already. People moved slower and spoke in hushed voices. The man left his house early. He could feel the weight of what had been building for days. The strangers had left, but their presence still hung over the streets like a shadow. He walked through the town quietly, observing faces. Some were tense, others were hopeful, but all carried worry. The children stayed close to parents. The older men leaned on tools and walls. Their eyes followed each movement carefully. Town leader called a meeting at the small store. He asked people to gather to talk about what was happening. Most came slowly. Curious and afraid, the man joined them and stayed at the back, observing and listening. Leader spoke about the strangers, their questions, and the fear spreading. He admitted he did not know how to act and asked for advice. The people looked around, hoping someone would step forward. The man finally moved closer and addressed the group. He spoke softly but clearly about courage and standing together. He reminded them that fear was natural, but acting without thinking could make things worse. He urged them to stay united and watch closely before making any choice. Some nodded slowly, feeling the truth in his words. Others looked down, unsure of what to do next. The conversation continued with careful questions and thoughtful answers. People began to see small ways they could act without risking everything outside. The strangers watched from a distance, their eyes sharp and calculating. They spoke quietly to each other, but the words carried tension. Their plan was not yet clear, but they tested the town with small actions to see the reaction. The man noticed small movements and gestures, people adjusting positions, talking in low voices. He understood the importance of observing everything. Even the smallest detail could change the outcome of what was to come later in the day. A disagreement broke out between two townspeople. One wanted to take action immediately. The other wanted to wait and see. The man stepped between them and spoke calmly about patience and observation. He reminded them that rushing could make things worse. He told them to trust their own judgment and stand together. Groups slowly dispersed, and the town returned to a quiet rhythm. The sun felt harsh, and the wind carried dust across the empty streets. The man continued his rounds, helping neighbors, fixing fences, checking on animals, all while keeping a careful watch on the town. The young worker visited again. He spoke about fear spreading and how people were talking behind closed doors. The man listened and nodded. He gave advice about staying calm and acting together. He reminded the worker that even small actions mattered in courage. Could grow quietly. As evening approached, the strangers returned. They moved through the town, touching fences and doors. Their presence alone created tension. People stayed inside or watched from a distance. The man remained calm. He observed everything and calculated how the town could react without panic. The strangers spoke with some townspeople, testing loyalty and strength. They asked about land and property in a smooth but demanding way. People answered carefully, not revealing everything. The man moved quietly among them, watching the faces and gestures. The town leader came to speak again. The man gave advice about how to respond without anger and how to protect people from unnecessary harm. He reminded the leader that courage was more than strength.
Wow.
It was wisdom and timing combined. Night fell and the town was restless. People kept lamps lit and stayed close to families. The man walked outside alone, thinking about the past days. He knew the strangers would return, and soon the choices made would matter more than ever. The wind carried whispers and the sound of distant animals. Across the land, the streets felt alive with anticipation. The man understood that the next day could bring actions that would change the town forever. Prepared himself to guide and protect quietly, he knew his role was not to fight alone, but to help the town find courage. He remembered the moments from his life when patience and wisdom had saved
Us.
others, and he understood that now those lessons were needed again. The town waited unknowingly for what was coming. The man stood ready, knowing that the strangers would test them again soon, and that the courage of many could be awakened by small, careful choices. The Wild West scene was growing closer to its moment, and nothing would be the same after it passed. The sun rose slowly over the town, casting long shadows across the dusty street. People moved cautiously, feeling the weight of what was coming. The strangers had returned, and their presence made the town tense. The man left his house early and walked with calm determination toward the center of town. He saw the faces of the townspeople. Some were afraid, others held hope. They watched each step of the strangers, who moved with confidence, testing the air with every glance. The man took his time, observing everything, noticing gestures, words, and expressions. Nothing escaped his attention. The strangers stopped in the middle of the street and spoke about rules, control, and ownership. Their words were smooth and deliberate, but their meaning carried a challenge. The town fell silent as everyone tried to understand what was expected. Man stepped forward slowly and spoke to the people around him. He reminded them that courage was not the absence of fear, but action. In spite of it, he urged them to stay united and calm, to watch carefully and make decisions together rather than alone. Some nodded slowly, feeling strength growing inside. Others hesitated, unsure if they could stand firm. The man knew that small acts of confidence would ripple through the crowd and change the mood of the town. The strangers noticed the man and smiled thin smiles. They tested him with questions about loyalty and decisions. He did not answer quickly, but looked at the people around him. He understood that showing calm and wisdom mattered more than raising his voice. A group of townspeople stepped forward to ask questions about safety and fairness. The man guided them quietly, helping them understand how to respond without panic or aggression. He reminded them that observing carefully and acting together was stronger than acting alone. The stranger spoke again, challenging the town. They asked who would step forward to act and who would stay silent. The air grew heavy with tension. The man looked at faces young and old. Seeing the fear, the hope, and the courage hidden inside, he knew the moment of decision had arrived. He spoke clearly about standing with truth, protecting each other, and acting with courage even if the outcome was uncertain. His words moved through the crowd, slowly awakening strength people did not know they had. The young worker nodded quietly, inspired by the calm determination. Some townspeople stepped closer, showing they were ready to stand together. Others stayed back, unsure, but listening carefully. The man watched carefully and made sure no one felt alone. He understood that unity was the strongest defense and the best shield against fear. The strangers moved through the street, noticing the change in the town. They spoke quietly to each other, their plans now needing adjustment. They had tested the town and found unexpected resistance hidden in courage, and come by afternoon the town felt different. People moved with careful confidence. They helped each other keep calm and prepared for what might come. The man guided quietly, observing and advising. He made sure that the smallest acts of courage were noticed and strengthened. The sun turned harsh and the shadows grew long. The wind carried dust and distant sounds across the town. The strangers prepared to leave, but not without making their presence known. Their eyes measured every face. Assessing strength and loyalty, the man stayed close to the townspeople. He helped them stand tall, even when fear whispered. He reminded them to trust themselves and each other, that courage could grow from small steps and careful observation. As evening fell, the town felt a strange mix of relief and anticipation. The strangers left, but their words and actions left a mark. The streets were quiet but alive with unspoken understanding. People spoke softly, sharing hope and caution. The man walked through the town, helping wherever he could, offering reassurance. Without drawing attention, the town leader spoke quietly to the man about how the day had changed everything. The people now understood their own strength and the value of unity. He thanked the man for guidance and wisdom without demanding attention or praise. The man nodded quietly, knowing the town had found courage within itself. Night fell, and the stars shone brightly across the wide sky. The town rested with lamps lit and families close together. The man stood at the edge of town looking. At the road that led away and the path that had been tested, he knew the day had changed the town forever. Wild West scene had left everyone talking, not because of fear or violence, but because of courage, wisdom, and unity. It was remembered not as a moment of chaos, but as a turning point where people learned to stand together, face uncertainty, and find strength within themselves. The man returned home finally and sat quietly thinking about the lessons of the day. He understood that true courage was quiet, patient, and steady. It did not need praise, it only needed to be present when it mattered. Town slept under a wide sky where stars watched silently. People would remember the day for years, speaking about the courage they found. In the calm wisdom that guided them, the Wild West scene had become history, not of destruction, but of human strength and unity that changed lives forever. The town woke to a quiet morning, but the air felt heavier than usual. The man stepped outside and took a slow walk through the empty streets. The events of the past days had left marks on everyone. Even the youngest children sensed the weight of the lessons learned, and the courage discovered. He saw neighbors greeting each other with cautious smiles. The stores opened slowly, and people moved carefully, yet with a new sense of purpose. The man continued observing and helping, quietly fixing fences, checking animals, offering guidance where needed without drawing attention to himself. The strangers had not returned yet, but their presence still lingered in stories, whispered, and glances exchanged across streets. People were more aware of their actions, more careful in speech, yet stronger in confidence. The man noticed small acts of courage all around. He saw an older woman carry heavy supplies without asking for help. He saw a young boy help a neighbor with a stubborn animal. He saw men and women exchange encouraging words quietly without fanfare. Each small act built a network of strength. In the town leader approached him and spoke softly about how different the community felt now. He admitted that the past days had awakened something important in people, and that the guidance and calm presence of the man had helped more than he could have imagined. The man listened quietly and nodded. He reminded the leader that the strength was always inside the people themselves. They only needed to see it and trust it to act together. He emphasized that courage could grow quietly and steadily. When given attention and respect, by mid-morning, a few strangers arrived at the edge of town. Their movements were slow and deliberate, but they did not enter the streets fully. They observed from a distance, measuring the unity and calm that had emerged in the community. The man watched from afar, to knowing that patience and observation were the key to keeping people safe. People began small preparations under his guidance. They reinforced fences, checked supplies, and planned ways to protect each other without causing fear or panic. The man moved among them quietly, offering advice and encouragement. He showed that action could be calm and deliberate, not rushed and angry. The strangers attempted to provoke reactions by speaking loudly and making threats across the streets, yet the town remained calm. Their eyes followed instructions and watched every detail. Their steps were careful, but they stood together. The man observed each gesture and shared understanding through small words and nods. In the afternoon, the town gathered at the main square for a meeting led by the man and the town leader. People spoke quietly about observations from the strangers, about what they had learned and what they feared. They shared strategies about staying united without giving away unnecessary information. The man reminded them that strength came from wisdom as much as courage. He spoke to the people about trust in each other and staying calm even when the unexpected appeared. He told stories from his past about quiet courage and the importance of small, careful decisions over rash action. The townspeople listened and absorbed the meaning with slow realization. The strangers observed the gathering from a distance. Their expressions showed both surprise and respect. They had expected fear and confusion, yet found organized calm. They whispered to each other, reconsidering their approach and presence in the town. Evening approached and the sky grew dim. The town continued its preparation quietly. People worked together, reinforcing supplies and planning movements. The man guided them with patience, showing that calm action could create a powerful effect without any loud display of force. the young worker visited again. Bringing news and concerns, he asked about the possibility of another confrontation. The man reassured him with quiet confidence, telling him that staying alert, observing carefully, and acting together gave the town more power than any challenge. From outside as night fell, the town remained alert, yet calm. The streets were quiet, and lamps glowed softly from windows. People stayed close to families, but also looked out for neighbors. The man walked alone through the edges, observing stars and thinking about the lessons of courage, patience, and unity. He understood that the Wild West scene had evolved into more than just a test of strength. It had become a story of human spirit and quiet. Courage. People had discovered their own capacity to stand together and face uncertainty with wisdom and calm. The wind carried the distant sounds of animals and movement from far away. The town felt alive with watchfulness, but not fear. Every house and street showed small signs of preparation and care. Each small act added to the overall strength and confidence of the community. The man returned home eventually and sat quietly reflecting on the days past. He knew the town had changed forever, not through confrontation or loud action, but through steady observation, careful guidance, and the recognition of courage inside each person. The stars shone across the wide sky, and the town rested with quiet determination and unity. The strangers had tested them, but it also revealed hidden strength. The people understood that true courage was calm and patient. That strength was found in unity, and that careful observation and wise decisions created safety and respect. Wild West scene continued to leave. Everyone talking not about fear or violence, but about the resilience, wisdom, and quiet courage that had risen from the hearts of ordinary people standing together to protect and support one another. The town woke under a pale sky with a soft wind moving through the streets. People felt the memory of the past days in every movement. Their steps were careful yet confident. The man walked along the edge, observing everything. He saw small acts of courage and thought about how the community had grown stronger through quiet actions. The strangers had not arrived yet, but their presence was still felt in whispers and glances exchanged across fences and doorways. People spoke quietly about how to stay alert and act wisely. The man guided them without drawing attention, showing that calm observation and preparation could prevent fear from taking over. In the early morning, the town leader approached him. They spoke quietly about the changes they had seen. Courage had grown among people, even those who had once feared to speak. The man reminded the leader that strength came from unity. In small, careful steps, it did not require loud demonstrations or forceful action. Neighbors worked together, repairing fences, carrying supplies, and checking on animals. Each small effort added to the town's readiness. The man walked among them, quietly giving advice. He reminded them to stay calm and observe all signs to understand the strangers' intentions without giving away unnecessary information. By mid-morning, distant riders appeared on the horizon. The townspeople noticed and whispered among themselves. The man watched closely, assessing the direction, speed, and behavior of the approaching group. He instructed the town to continue their preparations calmly and silently, letting everyone know that fear would not guide their actions. Riders came closer, and the shapes of strangers became clear. They rode deliberately across the land, appearing confident and calculating. The townspeople stood quietly, watching from behind fences and buildings. The man moved among them, encouraging small acts of courage, helping those who felt uncertain, and reminding everyone to stay together. The strangers entered the edge of town slowly. They spoke to each other in low voices, observing the streets and buildings. They did not make aggressive movements, yet the tension in the air grew. Each step was measured, as if testing the town for weakness. Man guided the townspeople quietly, pointing out safe positions and ways to support each other without attracting attention. He reminded them that calmness and awareness were the strongest defenses against intimidation. The townspeople moved in quiet harmony, showing readiness and unity. By afternoon, the strangers stopped near the main square. They spoke in low but deliberate tones, testing the patience and courage of the community. They asked indirect questions about ownership decisions and who would act when challenges arose. The town responded without panic, quietly showing their readiness through composed actions. The man stepped forward, slowly addressing the townspeople. He spoke about the importance of standing together, trusting each other, and responding with wisdom rather than fear. His words carried through the crowd. Awakening confidence and determination, he reminded them that courage was stronger when shared and patience was a shield against uncertainty. Young worker followed closely, helping neighbors and observing how the townspeople reacted. The man guided the worker, reminding him that observing small details and staying calm would provide insight into the stranger's plans. The worker nodded, understanding that small actions and careful attention mattered more than noise. In confrontation, the strangers continued to test the town with questions and gestures, attempting to provoke reactions. They noticed the composed response and exchanged uncertain glances. They had expected fear and chaos, yet found quiet strength. They reassessed their approach, knowing the town had grown resilient. Fell, and the town remained alert but calm. People reinforced supplies, checked on animals, and ensured everyone had safe places to gather if needed. The man moved among them, guiding with quiet words and gestures. He emphasized observation, preparation, and patience over fear-driven action. The town leader spoke again, asking about how to maintain unity and courage. The man reminded him that everyone had already found strength within themselves, and that observing together and supporting each other quietly was enough to face any challenge. He encouraged the leader to show trust in the people and guide without forces. Night came, the stars appeared bright over the wide land. The town settled quietly into homes, keeping lamps lit and looking out for neighbors. The man stood at the edge of town, reflecting on how far the community had come. Each person had discovered the strength to act together and the power of calm observation. Wind carried distant sounds from far away, but the town remained composed. No unnecessary movement or panic occurred. Each action was deliberate, each choice made carefully. The strangers watched from a distance, noting the transformation of the town and the quiet courage of its people. The man walked through the streets, guiding quietly, making sure people were comfortable and aware of their surroundings. He reminded them that courage was a habit built over time through small actions, observation, and trust in one another. The townspeople began to realize the depth of their own resilience and the importance of unity. The next morning, the strangers advanced slightly into town, testing reactions. The man observed each move and guided townspeople to maintain composure. He instructed them to support each other quietly and act with calm confidence. The town stood together, showing strength without raising voices or creating panic. Small groups helped each other reinforce structures, moved supplies, and observed the strangers. The man coordinated with quiet words and gestures, ensuring that everyone understood the importance of patience and preparedness. He reminded the town that acting with thought and unity would always be stronger than rushed decisions driven by fear. As days passed, the strangers continued to probe, but the town remained steady. Each act of preparation and observation increased confidence and trust. The man walked among people, helping them notice small signs and encouraging thoughtful actions. Each member of the community began to understand the value of collective courage. One morning, a challenge arose when a part of the town was left exposed. The man organized people quickly and quietly, directing them to reinforce the area and watch the streets. He coordinated neighbors to cover each section, ensuring safety without panic or confusion. The townspeople followed his guidance, calmly showing trust and patience. Strangers watched carefully, noticing the effective coordination and composed response. They attempted to provoke fear with gestures and questions, but found the town ready and calm. They reassessed their approach, realizing that patience and quiet courage could not be shaken easily throughout the days. The man reminded townspeople to stay observant and support one another. He taught them that courage was not loud or visible to all, but powerful in quiet action. He encouraged small acts that reinforced unity, like helping neighbors, moving supplies, and standing together calmly. By the end of the week, the town had transformed completely. They moved together with purpose and confidence. The streets felt alive with quiet energy and cooperation. The man observed with satisfaction, knowing the community had built lasting resilience and understanding of their own strength. The strangers eventually left the town, recognizing that fear and intimidation would not succeed. The community remained vigilant but calm. They had learned that courage grew through careful observation, deliberate action, and Unity, the man guided them to maintain this strength and continue supporting each other, even after the immediate challenge past the town settled into a peaceful routine. But with a newfound awareness and confidence, people moved through streets, helping neighbors, checking animals, reinforcing fences, and sharing advice calmly and wisely. The man remained a quiet presence, guiding and observing, ensuring that lessons of courage and unity were remembered. Night fell over the town, and stars filled the sky. The wind moved gently through streets, carrying the sounds of animals and distant movement. The townspeople rested, knowing they had faced challenge with patience, courage, and wisdom. They had learned the power of quiet, observation, and collective action, and the value of supporting each other in all circumstances. The Wild West scene had left everyone talking not about fear, but about the courage that arose quietly among ordinary people standing together. The strangers had tested them, and in doing so, revealed the hidden strength of the community. The man walked among the streets, reflecting on the resilience of human spirit and the lessons that would be remembered for generations. People spoke softly about the events, sharing stories of small acts of courage, the calm guidance that had protected them, and the unity that had made the town strong. They understood that fear could be overcome by careful observation, patience, and collective action. The lessons of these days became part of the community history and were shared with newcomers and children. Growing up in the town, the man returned to his house finally and sat quietly outside looking at the stars. He thought about the journey the town had taken from fear and uncertainty to calm courage and unity. He understood that true strength was patient, steady, and collective, and that ordinary people could achieve extraordinary resilience when they acted together. The town slept under the wide sky with lamps glowing softly and families close. The streets were quiet but alive with the memory of courage and calm action. Each person carried lessons learned in the past days, and the community had become stronger through observation, support, and unity. The Wild West scene continued to leave everyone talking, not as a tale of violence, but as a story of wisdom, patience, and human strength standing together to face challenge with courage. Town woke under a pale sky with a gentle wind moving through the streets. The events of past weeks had left marks on everyone, yet there was a new sense of calm and confidence. The man walked slowly along the streets, observing people working quietly and carefully, each action deliberate and thoughtful. Neighbors greeted each other with soft nods and careful smiles. People moved with purpose, reinforcing fences, carrying supplies, checking on animals. They acted together, quietly sharing information and supporting each other. The man guided where needed, offering advice and encouragement without drawing attention. The strangers had not returned yet, but the town remained vigilant. Every sound, every movement was noted. Everyone understood that calm observation and preparation were key. The man reminded people that courage was quiet, patient, and grew through collective action, not haste or angered. By mid-morning, distant riders appeared on the horizon. People noticed and moved slightly closer together. The man watched carefully, assessing the direction and speed of the riders. He instructed the townspeople to continue their quiet preparations, ensuring that everyone had a role and knew their position. The riders approached cautiously, their figures clear against the wide land. They were strangers moving deliberately across the field, appearing confident yet measuring the town with every glance. The townspeople remained calm, following the man's guidance. Each action was small, yet meaningful, showing readiness without panic. Strangers entered the edge of town, their eyes scanning streets and buildings. They spoke softly to each other, trying to assess the courage and unity of the town. Their gestures and movements were deliberate, yet they did not confront anyone directly. The man observed, noting every detail, instructing townspeople on subtle ways to show organization and preparedness. By afternoon, the strangers moved into the central street. Their presence created tension, yet the town remained composed. They observed quietly, watching the reactions of townspeople and the layout of streets and buildings. The man guided the community, reminding them that calm observation and unity was their strongest defense. Small groups reinforced structures, carried supplies, and checked on animals. They moved quietly and deliberately, each action adding to the overall sense of preparedness. The man instructed quietly, guiding gestures, words, and small signals, ensuring the town worked in harmony without drawing unnecessary attention. Strangers tested the town with questions and gestures, trying to provoke reactions, yet the community remained steady. Each townspeople, aware of their role, stayed composed. Small acts of courage spread quietly and collectively, strengthening everyone. The man observed, noting how each action reinforced unity and evening approached. And the town felt alive with careful energy. People continued preparations, observing each other and the strangers from a distance. The man moved through the streets, offering guidance quietly, reminding them that patience and observation were more powerful than rash action. Night fell, and lamps glowed softly in homes. People stayed close to families, yet watched neighbors and streets. The man walked through edges, observing stars and distant movements. He reflected on how far the town had come. From fear to calm, confident courage. The next morning, the strangers moved slightly closer again, testing reactions. The man guided townspeople to remain composed, moving supplies, checking streets, and reinforcing fences. Calmly, the community acted together, showing readiness without panic or chaos. Their quiet courage was visible in every deliberate step. Over the following days, the strangers tested boundaries with careful gestures and indirect questions. They attempted to provoke fear, yet found composed, calm responses each time. The town acted together, showing unity and preparedness. The man guided them quietly, helping everyone understand that small, deliberate actions mattered more than noise or apps. Aggression people reinforced structures, checked supplies, supported neighbors, and shared observations quietly each day. They grew stronger, more confident. Each small act built a network of courage and trust across the town. The man watched carefully, ensuring that lessons of patience, observation, and unity were being practiced. One day, a small problem arose when a portion of the town was exposed. The man coordinated people to address it calmly, guiding them to cover each area, reinforcing structures and observing streets without panic. The townspeople followed instructions, showing trust and patience. The strangers observed, noting the efficiency and coordination. By the end of the week, the town had transformed completely. They moved together with purpose and confidence. Each street and building showed signs of careful preparation and cooperation. The man observed with satisfaction, knowing that the community had built lasting resilience through observation, preparation, and collective courage. The strangers eventually left the town, recognizing that intimidation and fear would not succeed. The community remained vigilant yet calm. They had learned that courage grew quietly through observation, patience, and acting together. They understood that unity and careful preparation provided strength. Beyond confrontation, the town settled into a peaceful routine with new awareness. People moved quietly, helping neighbors, checking animals, reinforcing structures, sharing knowledge calmly and thoughtfully. The man remained present, guiding, observing, ensuring that lessons of courage and unity were remembered and practiced. Night fell and stars filled the sky. The streets were quiet yet alive with memory of courage and careful preparation. People rested, knowing they had faced challenge with wisdom, patience, and calm action. They had discovered strength in unity and the power of supporting each other quietly. The wild West scene continued to leave everyone talking, not about fear, but about the quiet courage that had grown among ordinary people. Standing together, the strangers had tested them, revealing hidden resilience. The man walked among streets, reflecting on human strength and patience, and the lasting lessons of calm, courage, and collective action. People spoke softly, sharing stories of deliberate action, courage, patience, and guidance. They remembered small acts that reinforced unity and the calm wisdom that had protected them. The community understood that fear could be overcome through observation, trust, and steady preparation, and these lessons would be shared for generations. The man returned to his house, finally sitting quietly outside, observing stars. He thought about the journey the town had taken from fear to calm courage. He understood that true strength was patient, steady, collective, and that ordinary people could achieve extraordinary resilience when they acted together. Town rested under the wide sky, lamps glowing softly, families close, and streets quiet. The memory of courage, calm, preparation, and unity filled every home and heart. The Wild West scene had become a story of wisdom, patience, and human strength standing together facing challenge with quiet courage and careful action.